Hi everyone, I'm Zoro, a dental technician from Taiwan. First of all, welcome and thank you for taking the time to join this online course today. I want to thank Bismail for all the effort they put it into organizing this online section. If you have any question during the course, um, please type them in the chat. I will go through them one by one during the Q&A section. Okay, recently I've been thinking a lot about how competitive things have become with so many different materials and the standing systems available. So the question is, how can we go beyond simple standing? Instead of just focus on color itself, I start looking back at the basics, color science, color distribution, and how light refracts, and how all of the finally appears to our eyes as texture. That's how this course was born. Today, we will spend most of our time discussing material properties and practical techniques. I can share some of my experience and insights from working with anterior teeth and give you some useful ideas that you can apply in your own clinical case. So, just a quick introduction about myself. I graduated from Taiwan Medical University and passed the national board exam in 2019. After that, I worked in a large dental lab for a few years, but over time, I want to understand more about the clinical side, how our work is actually used in the mouth. So I moved to working in a dental clinic. And after a few years, I built out my own case and my own portfolio. At the end of the 2023, I joined the Besmile Global Case competition, and I was very lucky to win the first prize. That experience had was a big turning point for me. Earlier this year, I opened my own dental lab. Now I have more freedom to explore, experiment, and open my work. My main focus is highly realistic interior restorations, and I will be share more of my experience and the case with you today. Okay, today's content will be divided into four main parts. First, I will introduce the new generation of zirconia materials and the objective theory behind the zirconia 3D Master. And next, we will talk about how zirconia has been widely used in veneer case over the past few years. From dentist preparation design to the overall restoration workflow. On the third part, we'll focus on the application of the Artamic stem, include the color analysis and the logic beyond how to use the list stems. Finally, I will share some clinical case and practical tips for designing anterior veneers. By paying attention to just a few small details, you can make your shapes and arrangement look much more natural. Since zirconia first come into the dental market, it has changed a lot. In early days, we mainly used 3Y TZP, but now the mainstream materials are multi-layer zirconia and then 4Y or 5Y TZP, okay? These new materials are very different from the early generations. As zirconia keeps improve, it has become much more translucent. This allows us to meet modern aesthetic demands more easily and get much closer to the look of the natural taste. Modern zirconia give us much more flexibility than before, and however, higher translucency also brings new clinical challenges. In the past, translucence was around the 20%, but today it's closer to the 45%, 41%, even the 49%. At the least level, the cornea start to behave more like the lithium silicate or glass ceramic. And the mix we face similar problems. It deals with the dark or discolored abutment. So Later, I will also talk about how to manage this color bombing and what points what or option we have in this situation. In current clinical case, master veneer preparation are done with a minimal preparation approach. The main goal is to preserve as much teeth structure as possible. So the veneer can be bound masterly to the enamel. Okay. Because of that, the reduction space is getting smaller and smaller. Very often, even after we do a digital smile design and tell the dentist that we need at least 0.3 millimeter or more. But when the model was come back, we realized we only have the about 0.3 to 0.4 millimeter of space. And under the space limit conditions, traditional glass ceramic become quite restricted. In this situation, zirconia veneers can be a very good option. The bonding procedure is simple, the surface treatment is easier, and clinical, it can also save a lot of time for dentists and for us, for every technicians. Okay, let's use a case for example. This case, we plan to improve the tooth color by 6 anterior veneers. At the first glance, the tooth doesn't look extremely yellow, but if you look closely, we can see there are many composite restoration present. Okay, cases like this are usually more complicated and harder to manage, especially when it comes to color control. From the intraoral photos, you can see there are many old composite restoration on this, but because of that, dentists usually become more conservative during the preparation because they don't want to remove too much teeth. And it's hard to know how big the composite actually is. And at this point, a desire to place the margin on composite or natural teeth become very tricky. So the most difficult situation is when the entire composite has to be removed. That makes margin refinement much harder. So under this condition, when the available space is very limited, zirconia veneers becomes a really good option. When we checked the abdomen shade, it actually wasn't dark. It was around the ND1 to ND2, just slightly yellow. And in this case, the available space was also quite limited. If we use the lazy dye here, because it's very translucent, it can easily look a little gray. But the problem is a lot of patients don't really like the red look, a little gray look. So this is where zirconia becomes a very good option. It still gives us good translucency, but at the same time, it has enough masking ability to better control the abdomen color. Finally, we use the BLO4 shaded zirconia as the coping, and then layering on the outside to add more depth and improve overall light transmission. When you can see, here is that even we use zirconia as the materials, although its translucency is not as high as glass ceramic, okay? Layering can really solve this problem in some cases. Combine different materials actually allows the restoration to get closer to the natural effect of the real test. It also makes the entire workflow much easier. And in fact, even if you choose to use only external stain, the aesthetic can still be very good. And one of the biggest difference between zirconia veneers and the glass ceramic is actually how the translucence behave. Glass ceramic is a quartz base, a uniform paste. The translucency is pretty much the same from cervical to the incisal, right? But zirconia has a cubic crystal structure, so it naturally forms a gradient of translucency within the materials. This becomes really important when we are dealing with incisal translucency in anterior veneers. Because of this building gradient, you don't have to spend too much time on complex porcelain layering. Even with simple stain, the result can look very good for most passions. Personally, the zirconia I used is always the 3D Master. With the latest update, both strength and translucency have been improved. They also enhance area where the translucency gradient wasn't as strong before, which makes it much better for anterior cases. And of course, Bismile have many different types of zirconia, but for me, 3D Master is still my first option. Why? One reason is consistency. The material properties are very stable, so testing and evaluating it is much easier, and I can compare the result every time. Another practical reason is inventory. I don't have to store lots of different colors or size, which really simplify daily management at my lab. And overall, it just make my workflow for more convenient. And let me show you a short introduction video from the Bismiles. It will help you to get more familiar with the brand. And Arconia 3 Master is the beauty layer. Its translucency is out of 43 to 51%, and also the strength height to at 100 to 100 to 100 mPa. So nowadays, more and more cases are done using the monolithic zirconia with just stain. The idea is really to make things easier for both the lab and the clinic. As the zirconia gets stronger, have a base color that's close to the shade guide, it becomes very a more important things, all right? With 3D Master, zirconia is made around the shade guide. Each layer has a different mix of zirconia powder, so the color is built into the material itself. Even if you only have the A2 or A3, you can still get the all 16 shade guide colors just with the external stand. This is especially used for posterior case where the color is simple. It really makes the workflow faster. And this was very hard to do in the past. So we can really thank material science for making this possible. A lot of ultra high translucency zirconia are used for veneers. In terms of translucency, they are actually very close to MT or HT glass ceramic. But for 3D master zirconia, the dentin layer is about 40% and extend toward the incisal edge, creating a natural gradient. With some other high translucency zirconia, if there's not enough dentings in the incisal area, you can see a visible light or break. The anterior case, this is very important because it directly affects how much time you will spend on the post processing. And sometimes, no matter how much you adjust, the light cannot be fully fixed. Okay. There's a paper talk about this. The compare for materials is HT zirconia, conventional zirconia, lithium disilicate, and HT lithium disilicate. They measure how much light go through and how look at the microstructure under an electron microscope. The results were pretty clear. And HT, Listed CK was the most translucent and convenient. Conventional zirconia is the last. The main reason is the crystal structure. HT listed CK is very smooth, almost no air holes, so light pass through easily. But zirconia has more irregular structure, more air holes, so translucency is lower. Nowadays, denting material are moving toward higher translucency zirconia, but we still have some air hole structure to control how light behaves. We don't want it at actually like this desiccate, but this balance is what gives us both strengths and aesthetics. For trends, 3D Master is also spatially improving this generation. They compared it with the other zirconia brands and glass ceramic, such as the Emails CAD and the Katana Zirconia STML Pre-Told and over 3 and Lava. So if you look at this result, you can see that in terms of strength, 3D Master consistency is reached over 100 MPa. And because of this, the risk of fracture is much lower, especially in posterior class where the occlusal space is limited. Compared to traditional zirconia materials, it's much less likely to fracture under this condition. As I mentioned earlier, a good zirconia development concept is the base color should be as close to the shade guide as possible is the important thing, right? Here you can see that even without glass, the best color of zirconia is already very close to the shade guide. Then we use only external stain to get the final result we want. If today's is just a simple color case like A2 or A3 with no special characterization, honestly, just glaze is enough. So this is also why high translucency zirconia is being used more and more nowadays, especially for a large dental lab. Higher efficiency in the same amount of time means higher profit and even getting enough the work earlier, and that allows us to spend more time on case and that really need to special handling. And I did a special management for this. Here I have two zirconia crowns. One is A1 and another is A3. Both just glass and no staining. So I took photos and do shed verification with Elab. So we can check the numbers. You can see they are actually very close. And you can use the value when you are planning to layering or to help you choose the coping shade. Once you know the target LAB value, you can decide how much space and thickness you need and which coping matches the value best. So basically, all stain liquids are designed from the three primary color of light, red, blue, and yellow. So you will always use these three colors when making the restoration. In fact, most color can be made just from these three, but there's another very important concept you need to know. For example, some zirconia brands after sintering will look more yellow. If at the same time, you also need to lower the value, we can apply the thin blue stain on the surface to neutralize the yellow. And this concept is the complementary color concept, okay? So when we do shade verification, what we were really checking is the difference between our restoration and the targeters. We call this difference is the delta E. So the smaller the delta E, the closer look to the real teeth with your eyes. And in most cases, when delta E is below 1.0, it's considered acceptable. A patient usually can really tell the difference. But Once the delta E over 1, the difference becomes obvious. That means the case must be repeated. So in the past, when we didn't have the number to help us making a static arterial case, many relied on experience and guess. And what approach with the approach, the error rate was actually very high. And with all these digital shared verification tools available today, matching the value is actually not that difficult anymore. But the real difference between an average technician and a high-level technician is the overall finish and the quality of the details. This is quite really makes you competitive in today's environment. So the shade matching mask I use most often is the Elab. It helps me clear see the difference between the current shade and the target color. But honestly, match the color is actually the last step. When dentists and the technicians care about even more is the strengths. We all want material that are stable, not easy to chip or fracture when used as restorations. Success in the end depends a lot on the technician's clinical experience and the personal skills. That's why assessed results are always a bit subjective. In clinical cases like this, where a single tooth needs to match adjacent teeth, the first step is always to analyze the shape of a target tooth. Oh, you can see that the abutment is very close to the ND7 and ND8 on the shade guide, okay? It's basically a mix of these two colors, at least sage. I usually pull into Elab first to do first analysis and get a LAB values. The next step is to make the color walks abutment simulation. After the walks up, we do shape verification again and adjust the LAB values of the walks on the model until they are close to the intraoral abutment values. Many technicians are not precise enough at this step. So uh, when placed in the mouse, it looks different from the target shade, even if the final restoration numbers are very close. So it's this reason, okay? So that's why single tooth match case are considered the most difficult for technician. Even though it's just one tooth, you need to verify the shade again and again. Sometimes multiple rounds of checking are needed to get a truly accurate result. Okay, the entire process, especially the stand, must be done on the color wax. And this is how it looks when placed in the mouse. If every step in the workflow is properly verified, what's left is just the expression of the details. Now, let's talk about zirconia itself. With advance in material science, zirconia has become more and more translucent, right? But this also create another problem. What problem? When we have a dark abutment or a metal abutment, some metal post, we may face color show through the issue. In the past, for cases like this, we usually choose white zirconia with the translucency below the 30% to 35%, right? But even so, making masculine dark abutment is still quite a challenge. I've actually tried many different approach, even used the white zirconia without any masking layer and only rely on prosthetic build-up. It's very difficult to block the background color within just the zero point 0.5 to 0.6 millimeter of space. Here you can see when zirconia is placed on dark abutment, the dark background clear show through, right? This not only lowers the value, but can also reduce the chroma. When we switch to an ND2 abutment background, the difference becomes very clear. The gray show-through is gone and the color saturation also improved. Because ND2 has a slightly yellow base, the zirconia look much more natural unlit and much closer to our original color target. If we take the crown off and look in along, you can see the 5 white zirconia has a slight translucency at the cervical area. Even without any background, it's not very obvious, but even this small amount of the translucency, it is enough for dark abundance to affect the final result. When space is named and we have to use the zirconia as the coping, we must do internal masking on the crown. So currently, there are many two ways to make the abdomen color. One is use the opaque liquid, and this opaque liquid is applied to the internal crown, so it penetrates the cornea and create a masking effect after high temperature sintering. The biggest challenge with the opaque liquid right now is the controlling amount. If the liquid is not dilute properly, even a light brush can make the opaque effect very obvious. It can show through to the buccal side. So, especially in thin area like the margin, which may only be the zero point 0.1 to 0.2 millimeter, then you end up seeing a solid white line around the margin to the buckle. And another method is to use the liner. The liner is applied directly to the internal coping as the physical masking layers, and then fire at around the 845 degree. However, liner have a clear drawback, and they are not easy to handle. You need to design more space for a liner, and after the coping has to try in back to the abdomen. It is really take quite a lot of time. So, and the repeat try-in can also close the wear of the model, and this may affect the fitness, the final fitness. So both masks have their pros and cons. Nowadays, for most cases, as long as the abdomen is not metal or extremely dark, I usually choose the opaque liquid to finish the cast. I use the Besmile the V1 opaque liquid for most discolor abdomen casts. One important thing is the must be noticed is the opacity. To prevent the opaque effect from showing through to the buccal side, I always dilute the liquid with the water the same ratio 1 to 1. And this helps reduce the obvious white or bright from the buccal side, um, while still keeps a nice masking effect. I sometimes combine opaque liquid and the liner to create a double masking effect and then reduce the uncertainty as much as possible. In clinical case with these color rules, we usually hope the dentist can prepare at least the 1.5 to 2 millimeter of space. This is especially important in the cervical and the margin area. A shoulder preparation is ideal. In many cases, the cervical area can turn almost black if there is no shoulder preparation. And the zirconia margin is also thin. It becomes almost impossible to block the background color. So that's why the clinical we still recommend both enough space and shoulder preparation is that reason. This makes the whole process more efficient and leads to much better to the final results. Come back to this case. This is the dark abdomen condition, and we use the zirconia as the coping with opaque liquid and the layering on the outside. This is the final result. As you can see, the color of the dark abdomen is successfully masked. Okay. Now let's check a difference between the materials we commonly used in the clinical. In the early years, PFN restoration used the metal coping on the abdomen, and the metal could completely cover the abdomen color because it is opaque, right? Then there the porcelain on the outside of the accessory result are adjusted through these porcelain layers. One obvious drawback is that it requires a lot of space to fully achieve the desired aesthetic effect. Another disadvantage is that porcelain has relative lower strength when space is limited or when heavy occlusal adjustment are needed. Porcelain fracture or chipping may occur. So PFZ is the zirconia-based restoration, and after the material enter the dental market because it is a semi-translucent base. By layer proceeding on its surface, we can improve the aesthetic result and still allow the background color to show through. With this PFZ, it's relative easy to get close to the natural taste and achieve good aesthetics. Another point is that the bonding strength between the porcelain and the zirconia is not as strong as the metal, whether we talk about physical, mechanical, or a chemical bonding. The PFZ bonding is more like cementation. Because of the weaker bond, the risk of chipping is higher in posterior teeth. When zirconia reached the 4Y, 5Y, and even multi-layer generations, this monolith restoration can now achieve the gradient color transition and the layer translucency. These types of zirconia can actually achieve very good accessory result, but here's the problem. When the restoration is monolithic, you have to consider the path of the light transmission to get the best visual effect. So all dental restoration are closer related to light. The way light travel when material you use and the different substrate surface create different physical effects. This is quite determines whether restoration looks translucent or opaque, and whether it shows depth in the final appearance. So the important thing is the origin of the light. In current clinical practice, muscle preparation designed by feeder or widow types. At the cervical area, the preparation is usually around the 0.3 millimeter and about 0.5 millimeter in the middle third. At the incisal zone, depend on the translucency, we usually leave the 1.0 to 1.5 millimeter of space. With this kind of space, as long as the abdomen is not too dark, even or monolithic, can show very good light transmission. Combined with the background color, the result look much more natural. In recent years, high translucency zirconia has been used more and more for veneers. To solve the problem that zirconia cannot be etching like glass ceramic. In order to reduce the risk of debonding, a zirconia bonding coating were developed. It needs to apply a thin layer about 0.2 millimeter of a glass ceramic, like a polymer, onto the inner surface of the zirconia. And the Besmile's product is called zirconia bonding coating. It is applied by the brushing, which makes the procedure easier and helps reduce the material waste. Okay, in the image, you can see that the surface particle of the zirconia are relative large compared to glass ceramic. Okay, after apply the bonding coating zero point 0.1 to 0.2 millimeter, this is dissected layers on it. Add to the zirconia inner surface. This doesn't affect the fit or make trying more difficult. This allows the cement to properly penetrate and lock down to the surface and help it resist wear from the lateral and the protrusive movement. But one important thing is that this desiccate coating needs to be bound through high temperature firing up to around 970 degree. Okay, it is a benoted things. And next, I'd like to introduce the Artamic stand system, include how to use it and its critical applications. Before work with any standing system, it also always recommend understanding its strengths and the limitation, and then whether the workflow fits your personal working style before decide to purchase or use it as your main system. Okay. But today I will focus on mainly on the design concept behind the stand system and the logic of different color and the mix together. This should make it much easier for you to apply it in your daily work. And currently, the Besmile Atomic series is mainly divided into two systems. The first one is the standard kit, also called the master kit, which is designed specifically for denture standing. The other system is the gingiva kit, which is mainly used for gingiva standing. But however, for today's section, I will mainly focus on the standard kit and explain its clinical application and the working concept. Also, these two kits meant seem independent, but in daily clinical practice, they can actually be used together. The great thing about the stand is that you only need this one set and you can basically use it in any materials without any problem. Because its composition is different from the traditional metal oxide stand. The color is much more stable during the firing, and basically the color you apply before sintering is predictable after firing. When mixed well, it follows nice and is not like traditional stand that are too pasty. It even contains the 3D glass component, so you can actually shape and sculpt when applied it. And many studies have shown the traditional stand have poor wear resistance in clinical case. But usually after about 6 months to years, the color start to fade. In contrast, this atomic stand system has the much more better wear resistance, and in general, it can maintain its color for 5 to 10 years in clinical conditions. This system is universal materials. You can basically use it for external stand on almost any materials. Be- Um, just like the listastic fused porcelain, zirconia fused porcelain, or monolithic or listacinic, even the PFM. Okay, because it's a low temperature stand, so you have a multiple stand or porcelain powders in use and need to make an adjustment. You can safely use the stand without affecting previous stand or porcelain layers. The stand system design concept actually comes from years of the experience by many technicians. They collect cats from both proceeding layer and the external standing and develop a logic of the specifically for our ceramic or glass ceramic stand. When we look at the natural taste, color isn't just about the overall shade. It's about the distribution of different colors and the depth. We usually divide the tools into four main zones. The first is the cervical area. And this is usually more saturated color and vivid. And since there's more denting here, the color is deeper and more intense. And next is the main color zone or called the body color area. This helps to determine the best color for your copies. And next is the warm color area. These are often a mamelon or area with a slight warmth, a translucent appearance. And the final is the cool color area. In natural taste, these are area without denting, like the inciso edge where the 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter of the porcelain is compact, or 1.5 to 0.0 millimeter at the inciso edge. Okay, this area I used to create the inciso translucency. Of course, this zone cover about 19% of the teeth. In some of the teeth where dentin is exposed due to word, there may be no cool zone. So the key point is when make any restoration, you need to clearly decide which color goes in which area and which color are surface layers and then which belong to inner layers. So you can see that the 19 color we commonly use can handle about 18 to 90% of the clinical cases. For rare or special shades or characteristic, you can adjust the color by mix different shades in different reactions. Still get the result you want. One great thing about the system is that mix different color doesn't make the shade too dark. Unlike a traditional stand, where the repeat staining or glazing often darkens the restoration. It also doesn't reduce their translucency. Even when you mix a lot of color, it's actually similar to the preceding powders. Mix different powders only changing the color, not the translucency, right? Usually before layering or I always first do the color analysis. After that, apply the color I want one by one. If the same concept for both proceeding layering and the stain, this way you can easily find the color you need to the restoration for the highly saturated one area because it contains a lot of dentin. So the color here is actually more saturated and stronger. Commonly, you will see the terracotta or orange shades, which represent long-term plaque staining. For smokers stain or taste stain, we usually use brown. Since the highly saturated one area is first area connect to the gingiva, you can also use a bit of orange pink to create a smooth transition to the gum. This way, the color blends naturally and it doesn't look like sudden color change. Then the body color area is pretty very easy. Figure out the shade A, B, C, or D. If it's a bit too yellow or too red, you can just add some yellow or red just near the cervical area. If the color is a bit too strong, you can add some terracotta or a bit of a brown to balance it. And one thing to say is that natural enamel doesn't really have the blue on the cool color area. What looks blue is actually due to the opal effect in the enamel, kind of the like of protein light reflection, which can give us blue-like appearance. So be very careful when use the blue stand. Don't apply the thick layer on the inciso edge because too much blue will make the tooth look unnatural. Remember, the stand are opaque. So if you only rely on the blue stand to mimic the inciso color, it will never look truly natural. My approach is usually to dilute the blue to make it more lighter, and in this way, you can achieve the effect without applying a thick layer, and it looks much closer to a real teeth. The most commonly used color is blue, but in the standard system, the blue is just one shade, closer to the sky blue and relatively light. I usually make it with the purplish gray, which is the gray with the slight purple tone. Mix them together, lower the brightness, and give a deeper, more natural blue. You can also add a bit of black to the blue and apply it to an area of the inciso edge with a stronger translucency. This helps create a slightly grayed translucent effect similar to what you get with the preceding layers. And next, the warm color area like the mamelons are usually lighter or brighter than the main color zone. For example, a light brown stain is the naturally lighter and more transparent. You can mix it with the pink or tinting shades and even dilute it a bit more to create a mamelon with the stronger translucency. Once you understand the logic of these four main zones, you can move on to apply the final surface feature. For the feature zone, most of what you see are things like smoke stains, tea stains, or white spot in the middle third, and some heavy calcification, and even brown quick lines. For the halo fade at the inciso edge, you can use the mix of white or light brown. Light brown is already slightly translucent with the yellow tone. Okay. And next, because the marginal ridge on the both sides, incisal and the mesial, are thicker. So I'd like to add a bit of the blue with the 3D glass to enhance the blue effect and give some light angle depth. But it's just a thin layer, only for slightly enhancement. With the Besmile the 3D Master, you can clearly see the gradient effect, and the incisal edge is more translucent than the cervical or middle third. So the tooth already has the natural layers, and all these colors are just for enhanced aesthetics effects only. Okay, and that's as I mentioned, you can add a gum color pink or red at the junction between the tooth and to the gum or gingiva. This helps the crown looks like it's naturally grown, give a continuous, seamless effect. Since it is just a final enhancement, I don't use a strong or dark color. I usually use the pink or orange pink, and even the orange pink is dilute. So the goal is simple. Just add the slight pink to enhance the continuity and less enough. Next, I'd like to create a hollow fade by mix the white and the yellow one, the ratio 1 to 1. As I mentioned earlier, the hollow face is milky, slightly yellow light. So you can also mix the white with the light brown or yellow depending on the look what you want. Okay. For the outermost feature, like the white spot, white band, or calcification, you can use the pure white, only white for extra the details. But one important thing to remember is I always recommend mix the white with a little bit of glass. This prevents the white from become too bright or too strong. In natural taste, calcification is usually hidden within the translucent enamel. By dilute the white, the result look much more natural and realistic. And you can also use the brown or terracotta to add some special stains like tea stains or smoky stains. But in clinical case, the masturbation don't really like this kind of effect. So to sum up, for only external stain, you can do it in a single step. Just apply the stain simply and directly each time. You only need about 10 to 15 minutes and you can already get a quick result. Okay, it's easy. If you want to add more characteristic and then make the tools look deeper and then more three-dimensional, then you can go into 2 times, 3 times, or even 4 times firing to add more detail on it. And personally, I also prefer the multiple firing approach, especially for anterior teeth. I always do it this way. Okay. This is the firing program for Artamic. It's set at the peak temperature of the 740 degrees and the holding time is 3 minutes. Under this condition, you will get a brighter effect on the zirconia surface. If you want to make the result more closer to the natural taste, you can use the 730 degrees for 1 minute. This can prevent the surface to bright and after repeat scan and firing. One more thing to keep in mind if you are working on a long span bridge, if the crawl time should be extended to about 8 minutes to avoid rapid cooling that may be cause the zirconia fracture. In green coal case, the some patient already have a lot of OD feeling on their natural taste, but they still want the very natural looking result. Once you do a proper color analysis, you will realize that on the contralateral tools, the warm color are mainly concentrated in the middle third. The cool color are actually surrounding in a U-shaped pattern, and then never and then near the cervical area, there's a higher chroma zone with a slight pink color. So if you know this concept, you can pretty easily rely on external stain to get the characteristic you want. For most doctor and the patient, if you stop here, they will be very happy for this outcome. Okay. So from our perspective, we also save a lot of time in the workflow. Okay. And at the end of the course, I'd like to share with you all our effort to mimic the aesthetic of natural taste are about enhance the light transmission. The translucency is the result of interaction between the light and the materials. As long as we choose the right materials and control the path of light, we can naturally create highly light variations. That's everything I want to share in today's lectures, and hope this is helpful for all of you. And thank you very much.